Hey guys, and welcome back. This is going to be my full series review of Inuyashiki. Now, if it wasn't clear already, I did enjoy the anime a lot. I don't think it's a perfect anime by any means, though I do think it has a fairly profound message. Now, there are a few issues that I had with it, and in this video, I'll just go over what were some of the failures, I think, of the series, as well as its strengths. So I'll start with Ichiro. He's such a great character. Right off the bat, we know who he is, what he's about, and what makes him unique, because he was an older gentleman that looked much older than he actually was, and how he was kind of shunned from society because of it. He's such a fascinating character because he is so good. He is what we strive to be as a human race, right? He's the prime example of what it means to be good and moral and just have these values that you will fight for. On the other hand, we have Hiro. To me, his message or who he was as a character was a little muddled. Essentially, all that Hiro is just a high school boy who gets powers and decides to kill people with them. Why he decides to do that and what his exact motives are just a little bit unclear, but ultimately what we just have is this guy that's going on a killing rampage. Sure, we can say he's a sociopath, and in that sense, you're absolutely right. Someone wrote in the comments like, oh, I'm basing him off of normal standards. You're absolutely, that's exactly right. But I can't relate to that character, and I don't think a lot of the audience would be able to relate unless everyone is a sociopath, right? But because of that, the series then had to more than make up for explaining his motives and his goals and what he's doing and why. I don't think that they successfully did that with Hiro's character. Ichiro, it's much more plain and simple. You know, you don't need an explanation for why you're good. I think we can all understand why people are good and they do good things. But we don't understand why people do bad things. And therefore, those things have to be very clearly explained, or at least give some context. I don't think that we had enough context for Hiro's character. And the reason I think that was because in the beginning of the series, they just painted it as someone that got pleasure off of killing. And then towards the end of the series, it kind of changed a bit. He was doing it for revenge or for other people. So I just thought that that was just a little odd for them to change pace. In addition, we didn't get sufficient background on the character. We just got one flashback scene and one secondhand account from Choco remembering something from their childhood. Other than that, we really don't have much on who he was before he got these powers, though we can of course assume that he was every bit as crazy as he is already in the series. What I find interesting is that we typically have the opposite of what we had in Inuyashiki. We usually have more from the antagonists, like what was, you know, their reasoning for becoming who they are. It tends to be like filled with betrayals and plot twists, and you know, they thought someone was who they weren't, and etc. And then we get like the superficial kind of like glaze over the hero because no one really questions why a hero is good. We all know why, because that's relatable. Now we do need to know why people turn. We just needed way more context about Hiro and his motives and his background, his past, how he grew up, how let me give you an example. They could have easily got into the divorce. Those things traumatize people. They could have easily said, you know, he's always had issues with making friends because the divorce of his parents really had this psychological effect, so you know, he's not able to associate with other people. That they could have done something like that easily, but they didn't go into depth with him. They could have made that character that much more relatable if they would have shown him as a child go through a divorce and see the effects of it. We need to see the effects firsthand in order to really be able to relate. And I'm not even gonna bother getting into that redemption arc that they gave him that lasted a whole one episode, which is just so pathetic, and again just really hits home the point that they did not know what to do with this character. I needed more from Hiro, the antagonist, than I needed from Ichiro. Ichiro's motives were self-explanatory. So on that basis, then I think that they failed with one of the two main characters. Ichiro is great, strong. We clearly know who he is and what he's about. Hiro is left for interpretation, which I'll get into that in a little bit. The second thing that I'm going to judge the story on is just the consequences. Now, in the beginning of the series, I was so happy because it was one of the things that I said ultimately that made this series just like a top-notch. anime series for me, and it was because I felt like they would treat consequences very seriously. We would see these terrible things happen to everyday people and see them struggle trying to deal with the aftermath of those issues. I think as the series progressed towards the end of the anime, that slowly became just like it didn't exist anymore. There were no consequences. People didn't really die. People can get brought back. And that is such a huge issue for me. It may not be for other people, but ultimately for me, if there is no consequences, then what is the point of any of this happening? I expect that when there are losses, there are heavy losses, and people have to deal with those losses and become better for it. But again, yeah, just not having consequences in the story makes me just not care about it. So next I'll move on to the parts that I really did enjoy about the anime series. And of course that's going to be Inuyashiki. He is the main focus. He's what drove this anime. There's a reason why I kept watching it, because even though it was heavily focused on him the first 5 episodes, then it went into Hiro, but they brought it back towards the the last few episodes where they did show Ichiro going through like really emotional things, thinking he lost his daughter, etc. And then, like confronting his family about his secret. Those again, that's what keeps bringing me back into the anime. That's why I enjoy it so much. It's moments with Ichiro. Hiro can fly off to space and go into, 1,000 smithereens. I could care less, right? So that's why that part in the finale I was like, okay, that's a good ending for me. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So I'm not like impressed or like, oh, he's so valiant, like he changed his. I don't give a fuck about him. So Ichiro is the star, of course. The anime is named after him, so naturally I just think they did just the best job they could with that character. I mentioned that the series for me dropped off towards the end, and the reason I say that is because they were on such a smaller scale of human suffering in the first few episodes. It was because they explored kind of these everyday tragedies through the stories, and that's why I liked it the most. There was like this authenticity to it, and the authenticity came from Ichiro himself and how he reacted to those situations, and he was who we all were watching it. Like, we felt the pain. Like it was just so much more real than seeing these airplanes just like crash. This series could easily have been a 10 out of 10 because I do think the first like 5 episodes were amazing, but because of the fact that they split focus, they went from Ichiro to Hiro, and then Hiro's the weaker character in my opinion, that then there was just this like I didn't know why they spent so much time on Hiro. Another disappointment that I had was how little they used his family. In the beginning of the series, we did see like his family was kind of the origin of his suffering, right? Like they just totally ignored him and they treated him how they treated him. And then like they don't come back until the last episode. Like we don't really see anything about them except for Mari, and they brought her in very briefly. So I think that they could have used more family time with Ichiro for all those episodes that Hiro was just going on a rampage, like whatever. Again, just to bring it up, there are some episodes that are good with Hiro, like when he goes into the people's houses and he kills them, and those were intimate killings, and therefore I think that fell in line with the series is how I enjoyed it. It wasn't towards like, later after he started killing the police. So pretty much after the people of Tuchan, I was like, well, where is this going? A few frustrations that I had with anime are just the questions that we are left off with. And one of them is, what are they? They still did not explain that. Why did they need water? Right? What is this? So why is water so precious to them and gives them power? And if water gives them that much power or energy, then why aren't there more of them there, right? Because water is a very elusive substance in the galaxy. Even I know that. So there should be more of them in Earth, since we're 75% water, I'm just saying. But on top of that, just why I wish that they had introduced another character, a third character that had their abilities, so that we didn't have these two extremes, the really good and the really bad. Which brings me to my next point. If I view this anime as like, oh, let me judge the characters, again, I have a favorite character, and I have a character where I think that they did a disservice to him. He could have been better. But if I view this as a metaphorical sense, like, who is Ichiro? Ichiro is good. He's all that's moral. He's God, right? He's who we aspire to be and want to be. And And maybe he's someone that we could never be, right? Because he's that good. And then Hiro is who we are, whether or not we'd like to admit that or not. But what does Hiro really represent? Like the selfishness in humanity, right? Human nature is so that we care about the people around us, people in our immediate environments. We don't necessarily care about what's going on in another part of the world. And that's who Hiro was. Like, if you're not his family, you're nobody. And that's kind of true to who we are as people, as a species, right? We care about, ourselves and our own. And so in that sense, then by having these two characters end up in the same place, which was ultimately what I didn't like about the series finale, that they both represented two different ideologies, but they came to the same conclusion, like, oh, we have to save Earth because it means something. There are people whose lives matter there. Just to go against myself, that's very inspiring, right? Because it doesn't matter who you are. You could aspire to be good, but chances are you're not. We're not going to be Ichiro. We're going to be somewhere along the line of the hero spectrum, right? And so we can still do good at the end, right? Because that's ultimately what it came down to. If you see that metaphor there, which other people may see different metaphors, but that's how I saw it. Just, Hiro and Ichiro representing the good, and then the uninterested, the short-sightedness, right? Just like whatever. Like, to me, Hiro's just so bland that way. Like, he didn't have passions. Like, his goal was never like, I'm gonna rule the world, though he could have, right? And it was never, I'm gonna kill everyone. And that, as much as it seemed that way at times, that wasn't his goal at all. He didn't have goals. At least Ichiro, for me, because his goals were so, righteous. They were like, I can't help everyone, but I can help as many people as I can. Like, he was seeing like this bigger picture. There was no bigger picture for Hiro, and again, I guess that's why I hated him so much. But if you're supposed to hate the villain ultimately, so they definitely succeeded at that. I hate him so much. I don't want him to be happy at all. And honestly, I want people who love him to also not be happy. So that's what made me even more upset that Choco was crying for him. I hate you, Choco. You're dumb. You didn't even help Ichiro as much as you could have. Like, and also, like, what were they doing this whole time that they were training? They let us go on Hiro's storyline with the illusion that, like, Ichiro was gonna come back bigger, better, stronger. And, like, they didn't pay that off. Okay, so they were driving cars, but we never really got to see, like, what they were really doing. And honestly, like, it didn't seem like they were doing much. Because when Ichiro was punching the asteroid, ain't shit was happening. So, I don't know what they were doing this whole time. So those are my thoughts. And a lot of you may or may not agree with me. Of course, that's natural. We all have our own unique perspectives that we bring into these shows. But I made this channel because I love talking and critiquing these shows. Even if it's just like a silly animated show to a lot of people, stories are what make us human. And however they are, whatever format they choose, right, to express that story or tell that story, like, it deserves like an equal like chance to be like thought about and critiqued and analyzed. So whether that's film, whether that's like a video game story, or whether that's a story that's told through anime, like, I take it very, very seriously. So this may go over some people's heads and be like, you're thinking about this shit way too hard, but that's true. I am thinking about it very hard. But that's why, again, I get so much out of these anime, and I look for so much from these anime because, again, it's such a good format to tell stories because you're not limited. So you can let me know in the comments what you thought about the series. How would you rate it? You don't even have to rate it. It's okay. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, these out of 10, out of 5, whatever, it means different things to different people. Like, people might think 7 out of 10 is a low score. I don't think so, but it was a solid anime and I enjoyed watching it. So again, let me know in the comments down below what you thought. Like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys for the next winter session. Bye.